Hi, this is Mark Laughlin with the Ambidextral Gunfighter. I'm going to kind of go back a bit in time and revisit my Kel-Tec SU16c. This is a terrific little, I call it a concealed carry carbine. Folds up quite nicely. Can even fire from this position. Can hold up to a 20-round magazine folded and still unfold and refold with the 20-round magazine in there. And I've got the little cheek riser here to line me up better with my Burris fast fire sighting system, a red dot sight. I do have added a sling stud on the front here, which actually clamps together what in the stock configuration as a bipod. This can fold out into a bipod. I'm not a big fan of bipods. I think they introduce the variability of the terrain into your shooting platform. So if you're shooting from a rock surface, soft surface like dirt or sand, it's going to behave differently. So I like to isolate the rifle with my body and my shooting sling. Now what I'm going to do today is do a field strip of the Kel-Tec SU16. And what we do is we start with punching out this small pin here on that holds basically the trigger group to the what you might call the upper or receiver on this rifle, and that allows this back part of the rifle to pivot down and out of the way, providing you with access to where you can actually remove the bolt carrier group. And the way you remove the bolt carrier group is you rotate the spring tube here on the foregrip so that the tab disengages from the receiver, and then rotate it to where it's straight up and down in the center of the rifle, and then that allows that whole assembly, the bolt carrier group with the recoil spring, to slide backwards towards the rear of the rifle. Now it's a little bit of a struggle on my rifle. I'm having to do it without putting the bipods down. It's easier to do this if your bipod can drop down and get out of the way to allow you access to that. Now once you get it loose, then you can pull it back with the pull the bolt on back and pull the charging handle out. It has a little tab on it. You have to kind of push the bolt carrier group down a little bit, and then that will allow that charging handle to slide right out. And then you have to rotate that spring carrier kind of up a bit, and that's why you really can't run a long optic on this rifle very conveniently. And I think, given this rifle, it's lightweight, it's probably better to, I think, run a red dot or a small, very short optic on this, or iron sights even, rather than, eliminate the advantages, the compactness of this rifle, the lightweight and compact features of this rifle. Putting a big giant scope on it, to me, is just silly. If you're going to do that, get you an AR, a heavier, bigger rifle. This rifle, when it fits great in a backpack scabbard. So try to keep your sighting system compact, in my opinion, to really take advantage of the Kel-Tec SU16c. Now once you have your bolt carrier group out, you can lay it out on the table and you tap out the little it's a pin that retains the firing pin, and it has a little O-ring in it, the kind of friction O-ring, so it doesn't pop out. It's just like an AR, really. And once you get that little pin out, you can then tap out the firing pin, and then you go to the side, the left side of the bolt carrier group, and you've got your standard kind of the retainer for the bolt, and it just comes right out. Now remember that this thing, the notch kind of faces down when we reassemble that. Now your bolt comes free, and so that's generally that's all you need to do on this rifle for cleaning. Now today I'm going to go fairly detailed on the teardown on this. So I'm going to go ahead and disassemble the spring from the spring tube, and so you rotate that tube around where you can see the pin through the little holes there, the peep holes, and then you press down on the end of that plunger with your thumb, and then to take some of the pressure off of that. And once you do that, that little pin's going to basically just fall right out. Just a little light tap with a punch on it and be right out of there. And now you got your spring. And you do want to watch and be careful. That thing will launch out of there with a bit of authority if you don't keep a grip on it. So now we've got the bolt carrier group completely disassembled. And what we'll do next is do some serious cleaning, and I'm going to clean out that spring tube. It's just full of crud and junk and carbon. So we're going to start with hops number 9 and get it good coated with hops number 9, and we'll get all the other parts from the bolt carrier group coated with hops number 9 and let it soak for a bit. And then once it's soaked, that'll the hops, that's what its real job is, to break down the carbon. And so we get all these parts coated with hops number 9, you know, so that carbon can come clean. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically completely degrease these parts. So we'll do a little bit of cotton swabs to get it inside inside where the bolt carrier group goes, and then the firing pin channels and all that. So we want to make sure and get hops number 9 just basically everywhere. And in this instance, I really want to degrease this rifle, get all the oil and lube off of it, because I'm going to dry lube it with Sentry solutions. Now while we got this apart, I'm going to go ahead and pull apart the extractor. And that's just a matter of taking a little bit of tension, squeeze the extractor as much as you can, and then use a pinch and push the retaining pin out. And then there's a little tiny short spring in there, and then that spring will look like it's full of gunk, but it's not gunk. It's a little rubber spacer that adds some extra tension on the spring. So we have to definitely keep track of that as we work through this cleaning process. Now after the hops number 9 is set and broke down the carbon a bit, we'll come back and wipe all that off and clean it out as best as we can, dry cleaning it, getting what hops has done, getting it removed from the bolt carrier group. Now what I'm going to do for final degreasing is spray everything with Simple Green, which is a pretty good degreaser. And in fact, what the hell, I think I'll just go ahead and get one of my wife's out of town, so I'll use one of her pieces of cooking ware and throw it all in there and soak it in Simple Green for a little bit to completely degrease these parts. So if you're going to use your wife's bakeware, I highly suggest you do this job while she is out of town. And fortunately for me, I don't think my wife watches any of my videos. So once we put the Simple Green in the cookware, we'll add some, another quart or 2 of water to get it completely covered and let it soak for a bit. Now, while that's all soaking, we'll go back and clean out the receiver of the rifle, and I'm going to use Simple Green on that as well. Get it up inside there and let it soak a bit. Get it into the ejection port, all down and through there and through the locking lugs, and get this all cleaned up really nice and sweet. And these are mostly all plastic parts, so Simple Green's great for cleaning that. Now once the receiver's cleaned out basically throughout most of the receiver, all the outside parts of it, now I'll work on the barrel a bit, and we'll run a bore brush through it a few times. And I'll run it bore brush through it several times. And of course you always want to make sure, I always feel the bore brush to make sure I've got the right size, because it's easy to grab a 30 caliber or something bigger. And so make sure you got the right size when you put it in there. And then so run it through dry a few times, and then once that's the cleaning part of it, to get all the crud out of it. And then once I've done that, then I'll spray a bunch of Sentry Solutions Tuf-Glide on the tip of the bore snake, and we'll run that through. And I'll do that several times as well, because the Sentry Solutions will act a bit as a cleaner and lubricant and preservative for it as well. And so just run it through really slow, give the Sentry Solutions the opportunity to make good contact with the length of the barrel, and do that several times. Now back to our parts that have been soaking for a while in the Simple Green. Now just dig each part out, make sure it's drip, shake it off a bit. There's the charging handle, there's the spring tube. We'll that was really full of crud, so got that all nice and clean. Then the dust cover and the bolt and a pin. Make sure we get the extractor. There's the extractor, and then or the firing pin, and the extractor spring was stuck to it. And there's this little, there's our little tiny rubber insert that goes inside the extractor spring. Really can't see it on my gloves. Unfortunately, black rifles and black parts just do not work well with black gloves. But anyway, it's a little tiny rubber piece that fits up in the spring of the extractor spring. So don't lose that. It's probably pretty important. And then the recoil spring. So now we shake those off really good, and we'll go through and rinse each one under the sink. Again, this is something you want to do when the wife is not in the kitchen, unless you have a shop that has a nice sink to rinse things in. Now, to further, take advantage of the fact that I'm here alone, I'm going to use my wife's hair dryer to dry out these parts really good, and hopefully she does not detect the smell of hops number 9 or maybe Sentry Solutions on her hairdryer when she returns. So we'll get these parts all good and dry before we're going to lubricate them. Work all the way, get that spring tube, moisture wants to stay in there. So you blow that out really good. And then now it's time to start lubing all these parts, and like I said, we're going to use Sentry Solutions Tuf-Glide, so I'm going to spray them all pretty liberal amounts, really more than probably what I need, but just want to make sure everything's coated. We'll wipe off any excess before we do the assembly. Now, one thing is that I'm wearing the black gloves, of course, and I wear them not only to protect my hands from these different solutions like hops number 9 and Sentry Solutions, but also to prevent getting any of the oils from my hands on these internal parts, salt and body oils that will cause maybe be a starting point for rust to begin. So that's 2 reasons to wear the nitrile gloves, is to protect yourself and to protect your rifle. Okay, so now all the parts have set for a bit with the Sentry Solution, so I'll go back and wipe off the excess bits of Sentry Solution, and my gloves are still kind of got lots of Sentry Solution on as well, but it just want to get the worst of it so I don't have too much Sentry Solutions on all the parts. So I'll go through and wipe each one down, just make sure it's not too much lube on them. It will dry. Sentry Solutions Tuf-Glide is a dry lube, so basically once the mineral spirits dries, the dry lube is all that's left behind. And what I like is it doesn't attract dirt or dust. And then also once you've got it applied, it seems to stay adhered pretty well, and it's easy to clean once you've got a good coat on it. So just making sure I get all these pins that are the reassembly pins, the charging handle, everything, all any metal parts, a little bit of coat of Sentry Solutions as a rust preventative. Now it's time to reassemble the extractor, and this is a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're going to wear gloves. I could probably make it be a lot easier if I weren't wearing gloves, but to get that little spring in there and then get that pin inserted, it's really tough. You really have to squeeze down on the extractor to get the holes to line up, and then get that pin started and then push it on in. And it shouldn't take much force to push it in. You shouldn't need to hammer it in if you got everything lined up right. But it does take really squeezing down on the extractor to compress that extractor spring really good to get that the pivot point to line up. There we've got it part way in, and then there it is with it all the way in place. So now we'll put the bolt back in the what I'll call as the bolt carrier group, I guess. And so we put the extractor on the right side, of course, of the rifle. So we'll put that facing the right side of this, and that way we know we got it in the right direction, and the hole will line up for the bolt carrier retaining pin, I guess you call it. And so you need to get that tab that's facing downward on that, and that will hold the bolt in. Now we put the firing pin in. Now you don't just willy-nilly drop the firing pin in. You do have to make sure that there's a U-notch on the rear part of it that's where the retaining pin goes to hold that in. So you put that in just enough to get that U-notch to line up with the hole, and then then you insert that pin that has the O-ring on it, the kind of friction O-ring that holds it in place. You just squeeze it down there in place. So that's pretty much it for the bolt carrier group, except for the recoil spring. Now notice that this plunger on the end of the recoil spring, the holes have to line up with the shaft, and then we put the spring cover on, and it has the little pinholes in it as well that have to line up. So we're lining up the rod, the spring cover, and the plunger piece. Those three things the holes have to line up so we can get the pin in. So it can be a little bit of a challenge because you are also having to compress the spring. So that always makes things fun and exciting sometimes if you lose your grip and it flies free. So you get that down in place and get that pin in there and good to go. And you kind of rotate it a bit and that captures the pin. Now we do want to position the pin kind of into the middle, although later I kind of push it a little bit off center as I'm assembling it, and then push it back in place once I've got it up in the receiver. But okay, so now we've got almost just one more piece left, and that would be the little plastic piece. It's the dust cover, and that just slides on from the bolt end of things and just slides back into place. Now you have to kind of bend it a little bit around the bolt, locking lugs on the boat, and so extend the boat fully forward and it makes it pretty easy. So here we can see this. You can see how the charging handle fits into the bolt carrier group. Has that little hole and a notch on it. So we insert the bolt carrier group up in at an angle, and this is where you can't have a scope on there because it angles up like that, and then you kind of shove it up into place and then align it to where you can get your charging handle clipped into place, and then you shift it up just a little bit more and push her forward till the plunger comes in contact with the gas port. Now the final part is to get pull that the cover on the spring cover, recoil spring tube, all the way forward, and then rotate the tab around, which isn't hard at all if you got the bipod down. I'm doing it, of course, with my bipods locked in place because of my I do have that sling stud mounted up there that it's kind of permanently locks the bipod in place on my rifle. Now for your rifle, you can probably just get those bipods down out of the way and it'll be easy to rotate that around. Then we do a quick function check, and then I'll put the final pin in on the what you might call, I guess, the trigger group part of the rifle, and one more function check, and work the charging handle a few times, check that click. You got to click for everything fires, so we're good to go. So Mark Laughlin with the Ambidextral Gunfighter. If you have an SU16c and you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.